Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today for Higher DevOps Integration in 5 Simple Steps. I'm Lindsay. I am here with Beyond 20 to do a little housekeeping and introductory stuff here at the beginning. We are super excited to have you guys here, and we are extremely excited to have Scarlett and Paul from the J. Paul Getty Trust to share this really amazing case study with us today about how they rolled out DevOps essentially in 5 simple steps using Sharewell software and IT service management platform, and a lot of creative thinking and maneuvering at J. Paul Getty Trust. It's pretty amazing. So first, a little housekeeping. If you have questions as we go along, just go ahead and type them in the chat box, which you'll see on the GoToWebinar screen. And what I'll do is keep an eye on them as we go, collect them, and we will manage those at the end in a little Q&A session all together. So don't be shy. Ask as many questions as you'd like. We are here to help. And I also want to let you guys know that after the webinar today, we're going to take the video and do a little editing, and we will send it to you via email along with the slide deck. So you're going to get all of that information in your inbox after this. So no worries there. And yeah, otherwise, let me real quick introduce you to Scarlett and Paul, and then we'll get rolling. So Scarlett Hu is the Assistant Director of Information Technology Services at the J. Paul Getty Trust, where she manages support functions, including the help desk, desktop support, equipment maintenance, asset management, client relations management, communications, and training. Whew, Scarlett. After a 33-year career, Scarlett has worked both on the vendor and in-house sides of the IT industry, and her experience ranges from consulting and support management to executive management. So that's Scarlett. And we also have Paul Riolo from the J. Paul Getty Trust, who manages all daily operations for the help desk and desktop support functions with a focus on customer advocacy, technical standardization, and process efficiency. In his 13-year career, Paul has managed technical support teams for both in-house and contracted support organizations at small and medium-sized, and large companies. So that's what we've got on the line from J. Paul Getty Trust. And we also have Andy Rivers with us. He is a colleague of mine at Beyond 20. He's a senior advisor here. He's here to help field some questions at the end too, should you have any that he needs to step in for. So Andy, hello, hi, good morning.
Hello. Hey, just before we get started here, just wanted to tell you a little bit about Beyond 20. I was just looking at the attendees, see a few familiar names there, so that's nice. Thank you for returning. For those of you that may not be familiar with Beyond 20, we are a 360-degree ITSM consulting company. And what I mean by 360-degree is the fact that we do training, consulting, as well as full implementation. So if you're looking at doing ITIL, either training or best practice implementations, any of those types of things we can assist with. As I mentioned, we also do tool implementation, so we are a full Sharewell partner. In fact, we kind of helped Getty with their implementation, helped them get started, and they have done great and amazing things well beyond what we helped them get started with. And that's kind of what we're here to learn about today. So I think with that little intro, I will turn it over to them to start talking about all the awesome things that they have done for DevOps and Sharewell.
Fantastic.
Good morning. This is Scarlett Hu, and I'm very happy to be here today. And I'm so glad that the introducers did not market our presentation as TED-esque, because at the Beyond 20 seminar, they said all our speakers are TED-esque, and I had to do an explanation of why our talk is not TED-esque. So what we have for you is a humble little case study. And I believe that we're all field practitioners, so we're not in the position to lecture anyone. So what we have is, a few things that we did that worked well for us, and we're here to share that with you. So not to say that this is the best way or the right way of doing things. So with that, our case study is how the IT department and J. Paul Getty Trust achieve high degree of collaboration between user support and system development by implementing 5 simple disciplines. So before I go into that, let me talk a little bit about DevOps. And this is not to teach you what is DevOps. It's just a level setting to let you know what DevOps is to us. So about 2014, we attended HDI, and that's where the DevOps buzzwords going on. And again, in 2015, there were a lot of webinars talking about it. And I attended one held by Bill Cunningham, and he said, Is it another buzzword to put name and a marketing spin on the same things we've been doing for years? Or is it a neglected phase of idle? So those are some of the questions that we ask ourselves. And we don't think it's a big thing for us, but here's one definition that resonates with us, and it's how we looked at DevOps to us. So it's a new term, a couple of years ago, emerging from the collision of two major related trends. And this is from a website called Agile System Administration. So the two collision of trends they were talking about were the Agile System Administration and Agile Operations. And this number 2, I think it's a good one. It's simple and easy. It just says, it expands the understanding of value of collaboration between development and operations staff. So, and that's what we set off to do when we implemented these few things. So, before that, let me spend a minute just on what the Getty is. The Getty is a large nonprofit institution in Los Angeles, and our mission is to preserve, study, and interpret the world's artistic legacy for the benefit of the present and future generations. A bit high-sounding, but that's what we have on our website. We are mainly known as the Getty Museum. In LA, we have 2 locations. On the left is the Getty Center, quite a beautiful place, and a free museum, as always, and will remain free, hopefully, based on Mr. Getty's will. And on the right is the Getty Villa, another beautiful gem on the Pacific Coast. So between the 2 museums, we welcome close to 2 million visitors per year. The Getty is more than a museum. We have under the trust all the administrative departments, which IT is one of, and we have 4 programs: the Conservation Institute, the Foundation, the Museum, and the Research Institute. So the point I'm making here is we are like many companies collected together under one umbrella. Going then the next one is to give you a little more background of our environment. We support over 110 applications in 6 different categories, and many of you may have similar categories. What's unique to us is in number 2, we have more than 50 different business solutions. They range from financial planning system, PeopleSoft, to collections management, grants making, facilities management, et cetera, et cetera. And we also have, in number 4, a myriad of research tools that our researchers and scientists use. So the takeaway is a lot of things. Some of them may be small, but nevertheless, we have a very large application catalog here. We have about 1,400 people that work for the Getty Trust. We have scientists, photographers, we have designers, scholars, of course we have executives. Again, this slide shows you the variety of our users. They're very heterogeneous, different groups, different interests, different level of computer savviness, etc. So that's the support environment that we have. A little bit about our IT staff. We have about 25 people in development. So these people support over 100 applications. So most applications have a fraction of a manager and a fraction of a software engineer to support. We have 25 people in infrastructure operations, the computer room, the sysadmin, and we have 11 person in user support, and that's the tech support department that Paul will talk a little more about. So with that, I will talk just briefly about the journey with ITSM. In the past 18 years, we've advanced somewhat with ITSM. In 1998, when the Getty Center opened, or shortly after it opened, we outsourced everything. So we started incident management with an outsourcer's tool. And we've gone through Service Center, Remedy, a number of different large systems. And finally, in 2012, when we took the outsourced function back in-house from India back to Los Angeles, we implemented Sharewell. And that's what some of the Beyond 20 people helped us with. So with Sharewell, we also implemented SLA management, and we also consolidated change management, where we earlier had an infra into Sharewell, and as well as knowledge management. So as you can see, not until 2012 do we collect all of our ITSM disciplines under one umbrella. And I think that's a major enabling moment that made us ready to implement some of the practices in DevOps. So what are we talking about? Here's your takeaway slide. The 5 simple ways to hire DevOps integration. And I want to make a note that we're not claiming that we have implemented DevOps. We just did these 5 things that kind of worked well and push us higher in the dev and op integration and collaborations, direction. So here's what we did. We did incident management, readiness, and change management, and we'll talk more about that. We did diligent knowledge engineering. We did this thing called annual boot camp, which is a fun thing to do, but very, very effective in promoting DevOps. We have a practice called department-wide IT pilot, which Paul will talk more about. And we have this career pathing practice that we implemented in our department. So I will hand it over to Paul now, and he will go over these 5 areas. On the lower right corner, we have this pizza visual aid, pizza being our staff's favorite food, so we love it. As Paul talks about each of these 5 ways, you will see that slide kind of highlighted, and that collects all the sub-practices that we do under that one way into a package. So if you're thinking about, if you're especially interested about any one of them, you could easily see what we did to support that one of the 5 simple ways. So with that, I will hand over to Paul.
Thank you, Scarlett.
Hello? Okay.
Thank you, Scarlett. Good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Riolo, and as Lindsay was so kind to introduce me, I am the tech support manager in charge of the tech support team for 4 years now. And I was lucky enough to become part of the team of individuals that brought the tech support team back in-house. And throughout that process, we did a lot of thinking about how we could make sure that as we were doing incident management and our SLA management, we could provide great support for our dev teams and our higher level infrastructure teams, and to make sure that we were providing the same, if not better, level of support as when it was contracted. So our first step, as Scarlett started to speak about, was making sure that incident management readiness was integrated into change management. So what's important about incident management readiness? This was making sure that we had a simple integration of our incident management and change management modules to ensure that our development team and our operations team meets our development team's requirements at the most opportune time and before we actually launch any upgrade or new enhancement or new application. So first we needed to look at what makes operations not agile. And some of those things are very obvious, like short lead times before implementation or an over-reliance on past successes. You know, my application has been upgraded 4 times in the last 5 years and we've never had a problem. I hear that one often. And a lack of service operation knowledge. So when we're talking about a short lead time before implementation, you know, a lot of the dev teams are saying, well, you have other work to do. All you do is support. So it's important that you just support my team. What does it matter if I give you short lead time? Well, we already know that when it comes to support, we need to make sure we're prepared and on the same page so that we can give that consistent support service. When we're talking about an over-reliance on past successes, you know, our technical environment is ever changing. You know, our workloads may be different at the time of the implementation, and our users are ever changing. We have people coming in and out, new people, people who have used the application for a very long time, and they have their own unique challenges and their own unique expectations. So we need to make sure that operations is ready for whatever upgrade, no matter how small it can be. And if we have a, you know, when we're talking about a lack of service operation knowledge, if we don't have a backup installation method or the ability to quickly repair or roll back when we have a user that's hard down, so to speak, when we're talking about that particular application, then it makes for a less than ideal user experience. So what can ops give to dev in this situation? Of course, ops wants to make sure that we get things from dev, but we also are a support organization. So we want to make sure that we give them the best user support for their project, that we can solve user problems quickly and on first contact without escalation. We want to make sure those dev teams are focusing on keeping the upgrade running smoothly, and in their first day, we'd optimally like to make sure that that is actually their easiest day of the week with all of the tasks that need to be done before implementation. So on the day of implementation and the days following, we hope to make that as easy as possible for dev teams. We want to communicate to users in a way that's consistent with the project's communication plan. And we want to make sure that we provide a feedback loop to the dev teams as soon as possible so that they could jump on those things that are important, they could prioritize their time, and make sure that they're doing a great job as well. And we want to make sure that we build trust and we have continual collaboration. So those are focuses of our team when we talk about how we interact with development. So what do we ask from dev here at the Getty when we're talking about an implementation? We want to make sure that we have effective training for operations staff. We want to make sure that we review the communication plan and any marketing materials associated with the upgrade or new application. We want to make sure that we prepare knowledge articles and tech tips, and we want to make sure we have joint ownership of the support plan. Although it is our primary responsibility in ops to provide that support, we know that it's important for dev teams to make sure that they have a say in the support plan, and we want to make sure that we give them that. So what does effective training really mean to us? When we talk about training, we're talking about really two different things, two different methods of training. First, there's classroom, and then what we would call a huddle. My team meets every morning at the same time. It gives us an opportunity to get going for the day, and it gives us an opportunity to always have a time where development team members can drop in and bring up things that they need. So when we're talking about an implementation, we want to make sure that we're utilizing both of those as potentials. So we kind of put some criteria around, well, which method do you choose? Well, when we're talking about classroom, we talk about usually when we need to train on content that'll take longer than 15 minutes to review, or you really have a need to demonstrate the technology to us so that to give us a better understanding of what your enhancement would be or what new features are available. And when we talk about a huddle, we want to make sure that the content is short and easy, or it's just-in-time training. You know, you just found out about it. Instead of writing a nice long email to tech support about some new things and you don't have time to draft knowledge, maybe you just want to come and demonstrate it really quickly so that we're up and running, we're efficient, and then you can focus in on doing the knowledge as it comes up later. So what's important to us is that we have a good training completion date as we're planning in the process. So we have requirements to make sure that training, whether it's classroom or huddle, is completed at least 2 weekdays before we pilot the upgrade or enhancement. Classroom is usually a preferred venue, and we want to make sure that it's scheduled as far in advance as possible, because availability and tech support can be limited. We do need to make sure that we're remaining operational throughout all phases, and so planning as far in advance as possible gives us the best method to do that. Pre-class learning path items, these could be the tech tips or materials that need to be reviewed in preparation for training. Those must be distributed to tech support staff 5 to 7 days generally before we do a classroom. This is not so much important when we're talking about a huddle, because that's more just in time, but it is important that we give tech support time to review the material so they have great questions when they go into training. And when we're talking about classroom, the length that we usually recommend is 30 to 45 minutes. We'll definitely have to schedule at least 2 or 3 sessions so that we can make sure that everyone from tech support is able to attend, and the 30 to 45 minutes does include that Q&A and demo time. So 30 minutes can get eaten up pretty quickly. And as I said, we always do 2 sessions, at least sometimes 3 for a makeup session. So as part of the incident and change management integration, we want to make sure that the communication plan is reviewed. And what does that really mean? Reviewing the communication plan to end users, Ops wants to understand what is your core message. We want to make sure we're mirroring that, and so that it's important to make sure that everyone understands we are on the same page. And we don't script things as much as possible. We like to keep our conversations with our users as casual as possible. So knowing what the core message is and giving a technician the ability to make that message their own and communicate it really shows that we are prepared and instills confidence in our users. We want to see what, for us, we have an intranet page where we post a lot of information, all the information for our users. In fact, and we even put announcements up there. Tech support operations team wants to see what those pages look like, because we often utilize those as part of our knowledge to reference those materials, bring them up during the support call, and point users to places where they can do things to self-help if at all possible. And then we want to see what the email communications look like, so that we can make sure, again, we're on the same page, we understand what you're trying to achieve, and we know what your core message is. So when we're talking about user tech tips, we want to make sure that those are reviewed, revised, and presented during the classroom training. This is all preparation even before we pilot, and I'm going to talk about the pilot in a little bit, but it's important that those tech tips are ready in advance. We know that there's going to be things that come up throughout the implementation and then throughout the support into the future for whatever enhancement or application we're supporting for those dev teams. But Ops must know what dev is telling the users. We need to see those tech tips because it'll help us make sure that we're troubleshooting the way that you expect us to. And tech tips are, the kind of the most common denominator when we're talking about communicating with users and providing self-help. We want to follow those so that we could teach the user to fish on their own, so to speak. And then the last major part of this integration between incident and change is we want to make sure that there's a joint ownership of the support plan. We want to understand and help dev to understand that potential call volume increases have to be considered as part of the success of this project. We want to make sure that in advance we're talking about what resources are needed, and that could depend on whether the software needs to be installed manually, or if you have the advantage of being able to push that software, or the application is going to upgrade itself. We need to make sure that we understand what that delivery method is so that we could plan resources. Perhaps it's just a matter of bringing some additional technicians in a little bit early on that day because your user base it tends to work earlier in the day rather than late. So some of those things must be planned in advance. And then when we talk about joint ownership of the support plan, we want to make sure that no matter what, the change owner and potentially a member of the lab is in attendance at the huddle on the day of the launch. There's a lot of things that need to be reminded of tech support staff, and that's just a great opportunity to get last questions out of the way before we're really up and running. So I wanted to show you kind of how this all comes together and how the development knows how we're asking them to give these 4 things all the time, and how do we remind them. This right here is, you know, it's what we call this is our request for change screen. But most importantly, I want to bring into attention this bottom tab that we call the acceptance tab. And this is really where we focus in on what are the things that you need as a dev team member to enter into your request for change to make sure that we are always integrating properly with the ops teams. So these areas here that I was just speaking on, these checkboxes, these yes/no answers, help the dev member to understand what are the things I need to deliver when I'm talking about my major upgrade or significant change. So we talk about help desk training method, that's classroom or huddle. We'll talk about our training completion date, which again, we like to do 2 days before we pilot. Did you get approval? So that when we're reviewing this change, the change advisory board can have that good knowledge available right in front of them. And then the four boxes down here, communication plan, implementation plan, support, and knowledge articles and tech tips, were those all reviewed in advance by the help desk. So that takes us into our second major way, simple way to achieve higher DevOps integration, and that is using diligent knowledge engineering. So what do we mean by knowledge integration? What we talk about here is continuous engineering of ops relevant knowledge by both dev and ops teams into the ops knowledge base. So part of that is making sure that, in essence, we have proactive knowledge management. So as part of what we consider that is 3 elements: the design, development, and delivery of knowledge. So when we're talking about the design of knowledge, we want to make sure we're looking at who authors the knowledge. There can be a significant debate sometimes about who does that at different organizations. We have a specific way of determining that, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then we want to make sure that during the design, we're forecasting and researching problems and questions. This design phase is happening during the actual design phase of the enhancement. So development understands what are the things that they're seeing during the upgrade or enhancement or new application. They have that information available. So those problems and questions are important to document during the design of knowledge. Then we jump into the development phase. We want to make sure we're instituting a feedback life cycle here. We use automation whenever we can, and we use the KCS principle UFFA, which is use it, flag it, fix it, add it. And this is just a way to help us remember when we're using knowledge, how we can continue to make sure that there's a great knowledge life cycle there. And then when we deliver the knowledge, we want to make sure that we're using standards and we're publishing it to a centralized knowledge base. Again, not rocket science. This is certainly something that many of you are doing, but these are important concepts to just make sure that you're implementing with consistency so that every upgrade has these things available so that you don't fall short. So when we talk about who authors knowledge, you know, because like I was starting to say, the dev team is actually documenting problems, issues during the planning of the implementation, they're able to forecast and then do research even before they approach tech support about supporting their upgrade. So we say, let's start with dev and we'll integrate ops later, because dev is the most capable of drafting the meaningful knowledge during the actual change, and that allows ops staff to worry about operations and support of that change. And then later on, we can then, once we build up some good faith with our users and some additional actual standard knowledge that we're using in the field, then we can integrate it into ops at a later time when things simmer down a little bit. A really important part of making sure that we have great knowledge management is instituting a feedback lifecycle. This allows us to validate the knowledge that's been cultivated in dev, allows us to have demand-driven articles that are reviewed by ops that focus on the articles that are actually being used in the field. And because as we know, there are times when we think that there could be a problem, but in fact, our users aren't actually having the problem that we had during the implementation and development phase of the change. We want to make sure that content is validated through ops, and that's used during the actual pilot, and then it can be modified by dev based on usage so that we can have continual improvement and have no wasted time on the review of unused articles. And we try and make sure that we're using automation to add that just-in-time quality to knowledge. So through our product, our ticketing system, we actually allow the technicians to select and update, send feedback directly to knowledge owners right when they're using the knowledge. So how do we do that? This is what one of our knowledge articles actually looks like, and I'd like to focus in on two specific areas. These two areas are what allow us to use it, flag it, fix it, and add it. The first two parts, use it and flag it. Ops will use like and dislike buttons to provide feedback. And when an article is disliked, we actually require a journal entry, which is then emailed to the knowledge owner so that what they dislike about the article can be communicated right away. And it starts that back and forth discussion about the use of the knowledge. Perhaps the technician that was disliking the knowledge article misunderstood the content or did not, was not able to understand a part of it, and this allows it to just become much more clear to him. Or there could potentially be an actual problem, a new issue has arisen that isn't a bug, so to speak, that hasn't been discussed in the past, that could be reported right away, sent with an email right to the knowledge owner right when that error message is happening. And then the second section, fix it and add it, we have an actual statistics area that allows the knowledge owners to see how many times their article is being used, and that then allows them to collect statistics and collaborate to keep the knowledge current. And they could, again, focus in on the knowledge that's actually being used and make sure that that is what's being kept current instead of focusing in on a larger umbrella look at their knowledge base. An important part of knowledge management is making sure that you implement some guidelines. So when we talk to our change owners, we make sure that they know they're responsible for revising all the current knowledge that's out there that could be associated to the change that they're trying to implement. And then we actually ask them to input those numbers, the knowledge article numbers, directly into the change request so that we can have a historical look back on what effect the change had on the knowledge base. We involve the knowledge managers in the publication process. I am part of that life cycle, and we actually, the knowledge manager reviews all the major changes or new knowledge that's implemented, which allows us to get a sneak peek look at what new knowledge is going to be offered up to tech support. And it also allows us to make sure that the knowledge articles are consistently implemented so that they're easy to read during those times when a tech may be furiously trying to find the fix for a user. And at a minimum, when we're talking about knowledge articles, we typically need these 4 kinds of knowledge articles. So what is the technician installation method? What is the reinstallation or repair method? Is there a removal or rollback of installation that we need to make sure we're prepared for? And if there's any known issues or error messages that can be anticipated, we want to make sure that that's included in knowledge base article. So that takes us into our third simple way for higher DevOps integration, and that's one thing that we really love to do, and we call our annual boot camp. So during a 2-week boot camp, the dev and higher level ops teams become the teachers and brainstorm session leaders in search of better collaboration. We typically will do this in early December, which is a slower time for us, but of course this could be done at any time. And I encourage you, if you are going to do it, maybe 2 weeks is just way too much time and too many resources. Perhaps a 1-day boot camp will be enough to start, but bringing everybody together and bringing dev and other higher level ops teams in to become the teachers gives them and empowers them with the ability to focus in on the things that are important to them and that they're hearing from their user base from an application manager standpoint. So when we're focusing on the boot camp and we're planning it, we want to make sure that there's a good development of curriculum, that we have identified our training methods, and that we're using multi-channel learning. And I'll talk about that more in a bit. So what do we mean by the development of our curriculum? We want to make sure that we let our data speak for itself. We have a great ITSM tool that gives us all this great reporting. So we want to make sure that we're using that reporting. It allows us to make sure that we're actually focusing in on the important things things that most of our users have problems with. When we're developing our curriculum, we also look at how we can integrate strategy and team culture. We want to make sure our DevOps managers are collaborative, and it allows them to then negotiate the content during the planning phase. And one of the other things that we do is not only focus in on our ticket data, but we look at what do we have forecasted for the future. What are our important projects right now or initiatives that are important to us in the next 6 to 12 months? We know we're going to have to talk about those already, so why not take advantage of the time where we have our technicians in a classroom session to talk about those things? And what other immediate wins can we achieve? And this can harken back directly to the ticket data, or it could be an issue that's just cropped up in the last couple of days and you haven't had a chance to come to a huddle about. So a lot of great curriculum there. So when we talk about training methods, of course there's the traditional lecture or presentation, but the way that we like to take this to the next level is we don't limit the presenters to dev-only team members. We'll invite key contacts throughout the different programs or even project sponsors to come and talk. After all, they are the users and they're the user representative when it comes to the application or dev team members. So we want to talk to them and give them a direct line into tech support so that they can talk about the things that are important to them when we're supporting their users. We want to make sure that we're potentially having an interactive or brainstorming session. We can assign individual reading assignments that beforehand that they'll need to read, and then when they come to the training session, there can be a discussion about that pre-reading. We'll have multimedia, like for us, we have lynda.com that we use, so we set up playlists that extend not only throughout the 2-week boot camp period, but that are part of our training curriculums for our yearly goals. So we'll give them a boot camp playlist, talk about some of the important different classes that they need to take, and then we'll continue to have discussions about those throughout the year. We'll also even tour customer areas, or we'll have follow-on practical skill assessments. This just makes sure that the things that are being taught and learned are verified as being understood and remembered by tech support. So when we talk about the use of multi-channel learning, we want to make sure we understand that different people learn differently. So the more different ways that you learn, and the more different ways that you learn something, the more that you're really going to understand it later. And then it makes sure that we're maximizing the effectiveness of the time that we're using with the tech support team members. We know that they're busy and they have a focus on their operational tickets that are potentially burning or breaching coming up. So we want to just make sure that that time is valuable. and that they're learning in a way that they can most be effectively learn and identify what they need. So our fourth simple way to hire DevOps integration is always making sure we have a department-wide IT pilot. So whenever possible, every end user-facing system launch or upgrade must have a department-wide pilot before it goes live for our user base. And then all staff in IT will receive the exact same package, which includes the training and communications, any system deployment information, emails, announcements, as the end users would, so that they can review and we can really give it a good test in advance to understand potentially what holes we have in our communication plan or our announcement. So what are some advantages of always doing a pilot for these types of launches? Our ops make sure that they're always participating in the test of this, so they can practice the new processes, they can practice using the knowledge and get acquainted with it, and then feedback, which actually helps the dev team to see their plan in action. It gives them time to adjust the rollout plans, perhaps revise their communications, and because of the feedback that they're getting from the ops team during the pilot, they can update their knowledge even before a user sees that rollout or that change, and then we can make sure we have great knowledge right at launch. This is a reality check. It just gives us the idea that, hey, are we ready, really? Is this something that we're ready to do at this time? Or is this going to be more difficult than we anticipated? One of the other things it does is it actually implements this sense of calm on go-live date. It's sort of strange because the stress and urgency that was felt during the pilot is out of the way now. So we have a good practice session in place. We did everything. We went through all the lumps that we might have that we didn't anticipate, and now that we're going live, there's sort of a stress-free environment when we start to potentially get calls, if we get any at all. And in general, it just gives us a great framework for success. So the final simple way for higher DevOps integration is what we consider career pathing. So when we're talking about career pathing, we're talking about two key elements. That's talent retention and then career development itself. We understand that talent retention can be difficult, and that's especially with our top performers. Our top techs are in demand in the industry, especially nowadays. We understand that. We want to make sure we have a way to keep them in-house, and career pathing is a real way that we can do that. It also leads to a more informed, satisfied, and prepared ops team that helps us retain our talent. Because they're not frustrated with the rollout, they're comfortable, they can be confident, they are the face of IT, and so they want to make sure they're putting their best foot forward, and preparation is the best way to allow them to have the confidence to support that change. And then, of course, if we're retaining, it allows us to be more agile and have better consistency during project rollouts and upgrades. And it actually helps to, of course, improve customer satisfaction because we have relationships with our users, and they know when they call a Nick or a David, they know that they're going to get the same kind of service all the time. They know who is giving them the support that they need. And then when we talk about career development, a roadmap, if you will, for each of the technicians' careers, achieving a high level of integration between ops and dev allowed us to tap into that experience, education, and skills. And we know that we have from that committed talent pool, which allowed us to promote frontline user support staff into those dev and higher level ops teams. And then by and large, it'll plant that awareness deep into the dev team. So we're actually branching out and putting our best people into the dev teams which then allows them to have a great understanding of what the needs of tech support can be as they're now part of those dev teams. So we have two types of individuals on our team. We have help desk agents and technicians. So what we've seen, and this is real life promotions, we've seen help desk agents go to junior software engineers or even become telecom technicians. And our technicians have become junior system admins. And you know, it just gives us a great sense of pride, and not only for us, but also for the technicians and help desk agents who are able to advance their careers through great integration between teams. They developed a familiarity with those teams and then could easily shift into positions that demand. So I'm going to hand this off to Scarlett to just summarize. Thank you guys for your time.
So there you have it. Those are the 5 simple things we did. Making sure your incident management readiness is connected to the change management. And I just want to say that you could do things in various ways, but having that panel of incident readiness checkoff in your RFC really worked for us, because you know, our director looks for that when she sees an RFC, and that just makes sure that all the incident management requirements are met by the dev team. Knowledge engineering, I know everyone does that, so we just presented the simple ways we did it. There really is no magic, it's just diligence there. Bootcamp, as I said, it was a very effective way that worked for us. The departmental IT pilot, you know, another little practice that paid off well. And career pathing is something that we really take pride of. So these are the simple ways, and I'm sure you all have, you know, your ways and you know, your experiences or, you know, your best practices. With that, I think it's the end of our talk, and I'll give it back to Lindsay and Andy.
Thank you guys so much. That was incredibly informative. The second time I've heard it now, and it's just as fascinating every time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you want to hang around for another 10 minutes or so, we've got some questions to throw at you. We've kind of, Andy and I have been sitting here consolidating, so we're not repeating each other or ourselves. And I'm going to let Andy tackle the first one because it's a bit over my head in terms of the technical piece.
Yeah, so some of the questions were, you know, you kind of illustrated 5 great things to do. And so as we talk about doing any process improvements or doing kind of improvements, you have the people, process, and technology side of things. And so some of the questions were revolving around, you know, where to get started, how to get started. Some of them were kind of people focused, some technology. So I guess just ask an open-ended question of, you know, what's the best place to get started? How did the technology fit into it? Did you kind of do some, you know, like the change management one, did you kind of make the change in the RFC and then kind of get your cultural change forced through them by them using the tool? Or was it vice versa or a combination of both? With that, I'll quit asking the question and turn it over to you to actually get a chance to answer it.
Yeah, I think, you know, people is important. So you can't just say, you know, today we're going to roll out this new panel in RFC, and guess what, all change managers, you have to work with it. We had to kind of feel our environment. We have to talk to the key change management players to see that, to make sure that they're on board. And the critical endorsement comes from our director. When she said, yeah, that's a good idea, we then talk more formally to the change management crowd. And then, you know, Paul went ahead with the development team that supports Sherwell to implement, to bring that into reality. So some of these things, people, process, systems, happen, you know, kind of overlapping in the time spectrum. But I would say, you know, we try to get our people to be on board and, you know, not to surprise them. We develop a process and then we implement it in our system. Paul, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that summarizes really great. You know, to get into kind of how the genesis of the incident management and change management came together was, you know, as a tech support manager, I was receiving you know, every time there was a change, the same questions from the dev team. You know, they really wanted to make sure that their change went off without a hitch, and they wanted to make sure that support was ready. What I was finding is every single time there was a change, particularly when it's major or significant, I was getting the same questions from different dev team members. So I simply just started writing down what are the things that they're asking me consistently across the board. And then that simply was just a way for me in a busy day to be able to say, these are the 5 things that I need to make sure we're focusing on for every major or significant change. So that's really where it started. And then as I was developing it and using it and seeing that there was positive feedback from the dev team, that's when I brought it to Scarlett, and when it really started to become more of a standard. So like Scarlett said, it started with the people. I started using it and piloting it, for lack of a better term, through just conversations I had in preparing for rollouts. And then it really became standardized through the help of upper management.
What was, and this is probably different for both of you or for each of you, but what was the biggest challenge you had in rolling this out?
You know, we did not roll out all these 5 things at the same time. They're done at different times, and some precursor of all of them were in the works, you know, along the months. So I would say, you know, to open that conversation channel and to get the devs and the ops team to talk. I think the ops team had to work very hard to earn their trust first.
Yeah.
And then they'll play with you. One of the things that we did in our annual boot camp is we seek out our top enemies to be our speakers and teachers. We look for the applications that are least integrated with the support team, and we invite them to our boot camp. And you know, it's a little bit counterintuitive because you kind of want to avoid your enemies, but we decided to face the challenge, and it worked out well. I think, you know, every one of them had their challenges, but we had our strong support from our director, and so I'd say, you know, this wasn't like pulling teeth. We're lucky to have very good colleagues. So we had small challenges here and there, but nothing that, you know, that was insurmountable. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here to talk about them. Paul, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, when you're looking at this, one of the biggest challenges, you know, we're presenting 5 different things, and each one of those things can take a very long time to develop. I think one of the biggest challenges for me was knowing really where to start. And, you know, this all that began for me right when I joined the Getty, because we were bringing tech support in-house. So I had to look at each one of these things and pick my battles as I went along. You know, as Scarlett alluded to, this all happened over time. And, you know, each year we do the boot camp, it just gets better. But the boot camp didn't start because of DevOps integration. It started out of a need to train brand new staff who were coming in. And we just later learned that, hey, when year 2 came around and it was December, we said we should do another boot camp because the first one was so successful. The first one was 1 week long. Let's make it 2 weeks, and we'll not have classes every day, and we'll make sure we're focusing on different things, because now that we have a year of support under our belt, we know what our next challenges are. So I would just say, when you're looking at this, The biggest challenge is not getting overwhelmed by all of the things that you want to do. Stay focused on the small things and let the biggest problems guide you in completing the things that you need. Use these 5 things as as guidelines to help you to attack different problems that you're getting, even if they're small fires that start to burn and become bigger. Those are the ones you're going to want to attack first. So think of knowledge, think of training, think of piloting, and making sure that as you're moving towards an integration between incident and change, that you're actually doing that as you're going along and putting out your daily fires or your monthly issues.
Fantastic. I'm going to call it after that one. We've got a minute here, but I don't think we can squeeze too much more in. So what I will do is thank you both so much for your time. You guys have done something really special there, and we're so grateful that you've been willing to share it with us twice now. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thanks to all of you for joining us today, and look for the video and the slides in your inbox. Have a great day, everybody.